In March 1945, the air over the ruined city of Cologne was thick with the acrid stench of corn at burning rubber and the sickening scent of death. A battle-scarred steel beast lurked in the shadows of the rubble-choked streets, its deadly 75mm long barrel gun scanning the intersections. This was a German Panther medium tank, one of the Third Reich most lethal, alarm-armed killing machines in the twilight of the war. In its cold optical sight, an American Sherman tank had just been transformed into a burning iron cough, and its crew instantly perishing in an explosion. For Allied tankers, turning a corner into a Panther in these claustrophobic urban canyons usually meant a swift and undignified death. Yet on this desperate early spring afternoon, the agonizing squeal of heavy tracks crushing debris heralded the arrival of a completely different predator. Its armor was dramatically thicker, its profile ominously lower, and most terrifying of all was its massive 90mm main gun. This was the M26 Pershing, a top-secret American heavy tank that even German intelligence had failed to anticipate. An armored duel destined to be etched into the annals of military history was about to unfold beneath the soot-stained, towering twin spires of the Cologne Cathedral. Behind this legendary narrative of adrenaline stealing smoke hides a blood-soaked secret that would violently rip a man from his sleep for the next 68 years. The true devastating legacy of this battle is not the clash of tanks, but a tragic crossfire, a civilian casualty, and a cross-Atlantic journey of redemption. Today we strip away the heavy dust of time to step back into the harrowing streets of 1945 Cologne to witness a breathless duel of survival. To understand the weight of this moment, you must first understand the man looking through the gun or optics. His name was Corporal Clarence Smoyer, a 21-year-old from the small, gritty coal mining town of Pershing, Pennsylvania. In a community defined by hard labor and rough edges, Smoyer was a profound anomaly. He possessed an incredibly gentle spirit, navigating his youth without ever throwing a single punch in a fistfight. While hunting was a standard rite of passage in the expansive Pennsylvania countryside, Smoyer found no joy in it. Persuaded to go rabbit hunting just once, the sight of the dying animal triggered such a visceral physical revulsion that he became ill. He never pointed a weapon at a living creature again. Yet the unrelenting meat grinder of the Second World War had no use for his gentle nature. This young man, who could not stomach the death of a rabbit, found himself thrust into the European theater as a tank gunner. By late 1944 and early 1945, the situation for American armored divisions was grim. The backbone of their forces, the M for Sherman, was reliable and numerous, but it was disastrously outclassed in direct combat against elite German armor. The Panther tank outweighed the Sherman by 10 tons, while the legendary Tiger weighed even more. German 75 and 88mm guns could slice through American armor at terrifying ranges, turning the Shermans into blazing infernos. The brutal reality of these disparities culminated in the frozen hills, cape of the Battle of the Bulge, where American tank battalions suffered devastating losses. The Ordnance Department had designed a heavy tank program, the T-26, back in 1940, but officials fiercely resisted its deployment. It was only after the horrific casualties in the Ardennes that reality forced their hand. In January 1945, a desperate classified shipment known as the Zebra Mission delivered the first 20 T-26 E3 tanks to Antwerp. These rare 46th behemoths were split between the 3rd and 9th Armored Divisions. Clarence Smoyer, alongside his crew, was assigned to one of these mechanical titans, affectionately christened Eagle 7. They finally had a weapon capable of punching through the thickest German steel. By March 6, the Allied offensive had pushed deep into the heart of the Third Reich, reaching the outskirts of Cologne. Once a bustling metropolis of 1 million people, relentless strategic bombing had reduced it to a dystopian wasteland of twisted steel. Among the sea of ruins, only the magnificent cathedral remained largely intact, its towering spires serving as a haunting navigation point. The urban combat was suffocatingly tense as Eagle 7 and its accompanying forces advanced toward the Rhine River. Disaster struck. An American Sherman tank from F Company was brutally ambushed by a hidden Panther tank at an intersection near the Cathedral Square. The American vehicle was obliterated, and the loss of its crew sent a chilling reminder that the dying German war machine still possessed lethal fangs. With the Panther blocking the main thoroughfare, the call went out to bring up the heavy hitter. Eagle 7 was ordered to maneuver through the parallel streets to flank and eliminate the German threat. As they navigated the treacherous, rubble-strewn avenues, the chaos of urban warfare erupted around them. During a heated exchange, Smoyer locked his sights down a narrow street, his finger hovering over the trigger. In an instant that would shatter his soul forever, a black civilian automobile suddenly materialized from a side street, feeding erratically directly into the lethal crossfire of the intersection. Smoyer's mind raced. He knew German officers frequently used such vehicles to shuttle between command posts. Operating on pure drilled instinct in a kill or be killed environment, he depressed the pedal for his coaxial machine gun. At that exact horrific second, an older model German Panzer IV tank positioned nearby also opened fire on the very same car with its machine gun. Caught in a devastating hail of crossfire, the automobile glass shattered into a million diamonds of light, and the vehicle jerked violently to a halt. Through the smoke and confusion, Smoyer watched as the passenger door swung open and a lifeless figure tumbled onto the cold and forgiving cobblestones. He had no time to process the horror the battle raged on, demanding his immediate, truthless attention. Quickly traversed his turret and fired his 90mm main gun at the Panzer for neutralizing the immediate threat. But the image of that falling figure was already burning itself into the deepest recesses of his conscience. Eagle 7 pressed forward, finally reaching the intersection that opened up into the Cathedral Square. There, sitting roughly 110 yards away, was the apex predator they had been hunting, the Panther. To their absolute horror, the German tank was not looking the other way. Its long, deadly gun barrel was rotating directly toward them. The American crew decided on an incredibly dangerous, almost suicidal tactic, firing on the move. In an era before advanced gyroscopic stabilizers, hitting a target while rolling over uneven rubble was a near impossibility, but stopping to aim would give the German gunner the precious seconds needed to obliterate them. Driver William McVeigh floored the accelerator, and Eagle 7 lurched into the open square. Inside the turret, Smoyer stared down his sight, his heart hammering against his ribs. To watch the Panther track their movement, the German gunner had the drop on them. Smoyer braced for the concussive impact of a German shell tearing through their hull, but the shot never came. For reasons entirely unknown to the Americans at the time, the German gunner hesitated. Smoyer did not waste the miraculous reprieve relying on sheer muscle memory and instinct. He fired his first 90mm armor-piercing round. The shell struck the Panther side armor without missing a beat. Loader John D. Ridgey shoved another massive shell into the breech. Smoyer fired a second time, and then a third. The consecutive devastating impacts breached the German armor, and the Panther was instantly engulfed in a roaring inferno of flames and smoke. Smoyer watched through his optics as the German crew desperately scrambled out of the burning wreckage, bailing out to save their lives. Unbeknownst to Smoyer at the time, an American combat cameraman named Jim Bates had captured the entire harrowing sequence on film, immortalizing the Duel and Eagle 7 crew in military history. The Panther burned furiously for the next 3 hours, a blazing testament to American armored supremacy at the war end. When the guns finally fell silent in Europe, Clarence Smoyer packed up his duffel bag and returned to the quiet hills of Pennsylvania. He married a woman named Melba Whitehead, settled into a civilian routine, and like so many veterans of his generation, he locked his memories in a dark vault. He rarely spoke a word about the war to his family or friends. But while his waking hours were peaceful, his nights belonged to Cologne. For decades he was plagued by terrifying visceral nightmares. He dreamed constantly of the ruined city, of the Panther tank gun pointed directly at his face, and most agonizingly of the black automobile and the faceless figure falling onto the cobblestones. The crushing guilt of taking an innocent life festered inside him, a silent, bleeding wound that refused to heal. It was not until 1996, when Smoyer was 73 years old, that the ghostly shadows of his past began to take a defined, horrifying shape. For the very first time, he saw Jim Bates' combat footage of the battle in Cologne. The grainy black and white film revealed the terrifying truth he had never fully seen during the chaos of the fight. The footage clearly showed the black automobile, the relentless machine gun, fire and the passenger spilling onto the street. It was a woman, she was young, and she was dead. Confirmation of his deepest fears plunged Smoyer into a renewed abyss of despair. The phantom of the intersection now had a gender and innocence that magnified his trauma exponentially. The turning point in his life arrived unexpectedly in 2013 when an author investigating the incident brought shocking news. A German journalist had spent years delving into local archives and finally identified the tragic victim in the black car. Her name was Katharina Esser, and she had been merely 26 years old, a civilian caught in the absolute wrong place at the wrong time. Driven by a desperate need for closure, an 89-year-old Clarence Smoyer boarded a plane and returned to the city of Cologne. He arrived at the towering cathedral, expecting to stand alone with the crushing weight of his guilt. Instead, destiny had arranged an astonishing encounter. Waiting for him on the grand steps of the cathedral was Gustav Schäfer. Schäfer was none other than the German gunner inside the Panther tank that Smoyer had destroyed 68 years prior. When the two elderly men met, the decades of animosity and nationalistic divide instantly evaporated. As Smoyer, overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment, stumbled and nearly fell, it was his former enemy Schäfer who reached out and caught him. In the shadow of the cathedral, where they had once tried to obliterate each other, they sat down to talk. Smoyer finally asked the question that had haunted him: why did not the Panther fire when it had the clear advantage? Schäfer revealed the truth: the Pershing was so radically different from the familiar Sherman that in the smoke and confusion he thought it might be a captured German tank. He hesitated to avoid friendly fire, and that fleeting second of doubt cost him his tank and allowed Smoyer to live. The two men discovered they were not monsters, but merely young boys trapped in the machinery of a catastrophic global conflict. They forged a deep, improbable friendship, corresponding regularly until Gustav Schäfer passed away in 2017. Smoyer's journey of healing reached its ultimate conclusion at the grave of Katharina Esser. Standing before her final resting place, he offered his profound apologies. He learned that every year since 2013, on the anniversary of her death, yellow roses have mysteriously appeared on her grave, a silent testament to remembrance and sorrow. Confronting the reality of Katharina's identity allowed Smoyer to process his grief. He was no longer running from a faceless ghost, he was mourning a real person. Miraculously, the night terrors that had chained him to the war for nearly 7 decades finally ceased. Despite his undeniable heroism in the face of the enemy, administrative errors, and the chaos of the war, conclusion meant Smoyer had never been formally decorated for his actions in Cologne. That historic oversight was finally rectified in 2019 in a moving ceremony surrounded by military officials and supporters. Clarence Smoyer was awarded the Bronze Star for valor. He wore the medal not with boastful pride, but with the quiet dignity of a man who understood the terrible price of war. Clarence Smoyer lived out his final years in hard-earned peace, passing away on September 30th, 2022 at his home in Allentown, Pennsylvania, at the venerable age of 99. Today, the stark black and white film footage of that blazing Panther tanks still exists, and old photographs still show the wrecked German armor sitting defiantly in front of the Cologne Cathedral. But the true monument to that day is not made of steel or celluloid. It is the story of a gentle coal miner's son who pulled the trigger out of duty, carried the agonizing burden of a civilian death for a lifetime, and ultimately crossed an ocean to find forgiveness. These people deserve to be remembered, and their legacy serves as a poignant reminder that even in the darkest chapters of human history, the light of empathy can still break through the smoke. If you were moved by this incredible true story of war and redemption, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with others. I will continue to uncover the forgotten human voices hidden deep within the ashes of history. I am your historical narrator, and I will see you in the next episode.